All right, welcome back in here to Live Now from Fox. I am Andy Mack. We're learning more about what happened last night, but also the response from law enforcement investigators, but Secret Service about what's going on there. A live look at the White House here on this Sunday afternoon as investigators treating the writings of this individual, Cole Allen, along with a trail of social media posts, interviews with family members, as some of the clearest evidence yet of the suspect's mindset and motives. We also heard from the White House, President Trump and the White House on saying this about what happened at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, saying in a horrific moment on April 25th, President Trump, members of the cabinet survived an assassination attempt when shots were fired. The President, First Lady, Vice President Cameron officials are all safe and unharmed. And President Trump actually commended the Secret Service for their actions last night. Let's listen in to this.
U.S. Secret Service protection ability. We saw several of the detailees take minutes to be escorted out the room.
No, they acted very quickly. No, I was very impressed by Secret Service. I'm the one, and Mark Wayne, you would agree with that, I think. Absolutely. I'm the one that would complain. You don't have to complain for me. I would be complaining. I'd be up here right now saying they didn't do their job. Oh, believe me, because, you know, it's my life, and I want to live because I want to make this country great. That's why I want to live. But when you're impactful, they go after you. When you're not impactful, they leave you alone. Okay, a couple of more.
All right, just listening in there to the president about this. Let's be joined right now by Barry Donadio, a former Secret Service officer. Barry, thank you so much for joining us. And I can only imagine what Secret Service officers were feeling in that moment last night, the third such potential attack on his life in the last 2 years, less than 2 years. When you look at the video, when you see the scene last night, what is your vantage point? How do you view it?
Thanks for having me on your show. And looking at the surveillance video of the checkpoint, it is rather troubling. This individual is running as fast as he can to bum rush through the checkpoint, and it's a good thing the officers were there paying attention to what's going on, and they addressed him, they drew their weapons and tackled him right off the view of the camera. But they got the job done. Now, right about that time, they were opening fire as well. And the other videos that we see are inside where the stage is, where President Trump is, and you can faintly hear the shots going off. And literally only a few seconds after that, there was already an agent running across the stage, then agents getting in front and next to the president, giving him basically a shelter in place and getting him on the ground where it's safe at that moment until you see the counter-assault team then respond to the stage, take up a tactical position to potentially repel fire if they need to. A decision was made, most likely from the shift lead there, to move the president off the stage, and they hastily did so. The president did stumble and fall. That is to be expected in a situation like this, and the Secret Service is prepared for that, and they got him off the stage and ultimately saving his life.
Yeah, and obviously they are familiar with this Washington Hilton. How much did that home field advantage play a role in Secret Service, just the familiarity of the venue and exit strategies?
Well, it certainly helps, and you said it exactly right. It's home field advantage. When I was in the Secret Service, I had attended some events there and worked at the same location. It's a big hotel, so I know there's a lot of talk that, you know, there are guests and why were they allowed to be guests in a hotel, but you could be a guest in that hotel and really have nothing to do with that event and not even go into the security perimeter, and that's how big this place is. So any guests that stayed overnight, they would have to still go through all the checkpoints that everybody in that ballroom would have to go through. But ultimately, there's all sorts of bells and whistles and security measures in place to keep the president safe. And we also have to remember there is a front door to every castle or a front gate to every military base, as well as a front checkpoint, even at an airport. Outside of that checkpoint that we see on the video, that's the open world. Anything could be there, a man with a gun or evil or anything. And the purpose of that checkpoint is to stop that right there and say, beyond this checkpoint, it is safe. And that's exactly what it's for. That's what it did. It was a big success, ultimately.
And do you feel that the magnetometer should have been further out? Because there are some questions about that, how close anyone really could walk into the Hilton, Washington Hilton, with a ticket to another of the private parties, not necessarily directly affiliated with this White House Correspondents Association dinner. The magnetometer being in that location, do you think they'll reevaluate that moving forward?
No, I think it's an appropriate location. And from what I can tell from that video, that's not necessarily the front entrance of that hotel. That seems to be like a guest hallway corridor or a tradesman entrance. So that's not the main entrance. But I think everything would be the same. The only thing that rings a bell to me is, do we now have to have some kind of like a fence or some kind of a barrier to allow only one person at a time to go through, just in case this happens again, where somebody decides to run and, you know, what if they're unable to be tackled? Then they can meet a fence to where the gate is closed and we're letting people in one at a time, even after they're magnetometered. We might go that route. That would be a logistical nightmare and add a lot to the protective package of logistically bringing that all in there. But we might be there right now. And as a reminder, and I'm not sure if other people are reporting it, this is the hotel where Reagan was shot as well. So there's also other additions that have been made. There's a Sally port there as well that contributes to the security of the hotel there, as well as the home court advantage. Like you mentioned, those officers and agents kind of been there, and it's somewhat routine at this point for them to be there.
Yeah, obviously familiar with it just in its proximity, but also the fact that it's been used for multiple White House correspondents. There's other high-profile events. We talk about this. Now we know that it was a lone wolf from California that was involved in this attack, a Cole Allen, a 31-year-old. But in the immediate aftermath, Secret Service, law enforcement, they don't know that. How do they go through it? What checklists are they kind of trying to figure out if this is a multiple-person attack? What are they going through?
Well, right away during this attack, you're absolutely right. They don't know what they're up against. And that's the more important thing, to deploy the forces that you've seen on a stage and make a decision, where are we going to go with the president? We don't want to get into a gunfight with 1,000 people in a ballroom. So it's best to get out of the line of fire, get him out of there, get him to an undisclosed location, and you know, protect him from there, and not fight in a ballroom full of hundreds of people, thousands of people. So what's in their mind, I can tell you that the Secret Service members are not afraid of anything. They're not afraid to die in their mission. They're only afraid to fail at their mission. So their mission is so important that they're willing to give their lives for the president, the people of the United States, and the mission itself. It is a very serious job. There are no mistakes allowed. People are not doing this job just for a job. It is a way of life, and it really is. Your whole entire life is that job. And as you can see, they performed flawlessly. They did everything textbook from what I'm seeing from the videos. And ultimately, they saved the president's life yet again.
And can I ask you, because we know the president in attendance, he usually doesn't show up to these, but other people in the line of the president, including the vice president, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, we also know the First Lady was in attendance from that. How does that complicate the scenario for Secret Service, knowing there are very high-profile, important principals, multiple of them in the same room?
Right, so it sounds complicated, but not really, because they all have their own dedicated protective details. Although, let's say the president and the vice president, although that's a Secret Service detail, they are separate. They're separate entities, and one is taking care of the vice president, and that's what we saw on the stage. It looked to me just by default that the vice president's agent just happened to be right there when the turmoil started, so he grabbed the Vice President Vance, got him off the stage rather quickly, even a little bit before some of the forces can deploy quick enough, and a large amount of agents, of course, around the president, and then the tactical team coming out, and then they got him off. So that was by default, in my opinion. We saw the other cabinet members get whisked away as well by their respective protective details. They're all doing it on their own. They're separate details. The Secret Service knows that they're there, and the Secret Service pretty much knows what they're going to be doing in an emergency. So although it may sound confusing in a sense, it is rather coordinated. And another thing that I didn't get when I was working at the Hilton there as Secret Service, I see that this detail was supplemented by what appears to be U.S. Army military police, which is another added caveat that I'm sure added a great deal of protection. I'm very proud to see them there. So thank you to the military police as well. They also helped protect this event in a very good manner.
President Trump was also asked about the incident at Butler, Pennsylvania, when he was on the campaign trail, the first such assassination attempt on his life. What similarities, what differences do you see in how the Secret Service responded to that back then and this last night?
Well, essentially the same. You saw agents run to him, get him down, and you saw the tactical team respond. They posted up in a position where if they needed to return fire, they could, which is a good thing in case they needed to. And they got him out of there. And so it's essentially the same escape plan, except this time really without any kind of sniper interaction because we're indoors, so that would be less applicable. But there was no shortage of Secret Service there because of the large-scale event, no shortage of law enforcement officers, certainly no shortage of communication because I think when those shots first got fired, there was some questioning, were those actually shots? And I'm certain the officers at the checkpoint voiced over the radio shots fired, and then we see the agents go into their roles of getting the president out of there. So it didn't take long. The communications worked great. The operational aspect worked great. Protective mission, everybody seemed to do just what they were supposed to do and turned chaos into an orderly withdrawal and getting the president out of there, which is exactly what they're supposed to be doing.
And of course, we know that there are no fatalities in this. Although a Secret Service officer was struck, they fortunately were wearing some of the protective gear that didn't make it a more dire situation. In terms of just what tactical gear Secret Service wears, is that common for them to wear a plate in that way? Is that the location? Is that just a general practice?
Now, of course, they wear body armor that's going to protect them. I wore it every day that I was on duty. So yes, they're all wearing protective body armor and have equipment to protect themselves from this kind of attack, as you could imagine. And the finest equipment money can buy and the finest training that can be given by the U.S. government, the top of the line.
One of my last questions, Barry, before I let you go, because we know they're looking into this. Potentially a member of their family was alerted to this individual trying to carry out this attack, referring to himself as a, quote, friendly federal assassin. And there's also an anti-Trump social media trail. How aware is Secret Service of potentially threats out there for the president? Are they going to be further informed of such options in the future? How does that coordination work with Secret Service?
Yeah, this is a tough case because it's being reported that this individual has no criminal background whatsoever and allegedly a school teacher. So he fits the role of a lone wolf person. None of us would expect that he would do something like this, even though he's a stranger to us. We would never think that he would do that. The trail on the internet, that is kind of the regular norm these days. If you go on any social media platform, it is that much hatred-filled. And, you know, we might have to start looking at ourselves and take a step back from this, from both sides. Because what it's doing is it's turning people like this defendant, which I don't think normally would have done this if he didn't have maybe the ideology really pressed on him through social media and through other outlets, probably never would have thought to do this. So I think that's the big concern. And it's so hard to detect because we are a free country. Government can't just go and start looking at us because they feel like it. They have to have a warrant or something under the Patriot Act, or red flag bill could be something as well. There are tools for them to use to detect this, but we're a big country. We have millions of people, and everybody says something on social media. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to do this. So it's a dangerous world. But my hat's off to the Secret Service. They did a great job, and they saved the president.
Yeah, and obviously commend them for their action, their swift action in that sign of chaos following the incident last night at the Washington Hilton. Barry, thank you so much. I appreciate your time, your insight here on Live Now.
Thank you.